it is so important to get your logistics right in the CONCACAF region, because if you don't...
The fact that the Haiti coach has never been to the island itself is wild.
Yeah, I mean, it's stunning and fantastic.
I think your dog agrees with
That's
you.
good.
Yeah.
Hello, and welcome to the Sweeper Podcast, the World Football Podcast made in association with FIFA Plus. I'm Lee Wingate.
And I'm Paul Watson.
And we're joined today by the perfect man for the occasion to talk about Curaçao's World Cup qualification, Haiti's triumph in the face of adversity, and all the rest of the CONCACAF craziness. It is the brilliant Jon Arnold, the expert on North and Central American football. Jon, a very warm welcome to the Sweeper.
Appreciate you guys having me. Good to be here.
Well, there is only one place to start this episode, I think, and it has to be Curacao, the World Cup's smallest ever nation. They went to Jamaica needing either a win or a draw, and it was a nervy occasion, but they got over the line without their coach, Dick Advocaat. What was your take on a very dramatic night in Jamaica?
It almost was more dramatic than I think we wanted. There's a late whistle for a penalty with Curacao needing that draw. Penalty Jamaica in stoppage time. The office, as the stadium in Jamaica is nicknamed, goes crazy. And then the VAR says, we need to take a look at that again. They get the call right. It has to be said. No foul on the Curacao forward, who actually was in the box making a tackle, but he got all ball, no penalty, and Curacao's able to see out the draw. So, great scenes. I think the reaction has been so fascinating, where I saw a post from India pop up on my Instagram today, and they pointed out that basically the population of Curacao could fit in the new massive cricket stadium that they have, maybe hosting, I think, the T20 final next year, which is pretty crazy to think about. But yeah, I was in Curacao in 2019 reporting on kind of the start of this project, but some folks I was texting with, when I reported in 2019, who I stayed in touch with, it was so funny. I wanted to talk a little tactics or get into how the game went, and one person just kept replying, unbelievable. And I would say, yes, but don't you think they defended well? Unbelievable. I could tell that the night the celebrations were already started, and that guy wasn't alone. So, what a remarkable story. And I don't think even in 2019, where they were always saying the World Cup is the goal, as we kind of convinced these players to come play for Curacao, as we started to try and get our tactics right. At that time, they were coached by Remco Vicentini, who was bringing together a lot of the team. Still, I think deserves a lot of credit for convincing a lot of the players to come. But then he's replaced by these big names. First, Loose Hitting didn't work, and now Dick Advocaat does work. So really remarkable what Curacao has been able to do. And it's a story that'll absolutely continue, because we're going to be seeing these guys for another 6-7 months.
Yeah, Jon, I was going to ask, so obviously, you're all across CONCACAF football. Like you are watching a hell of a lot of football in that region. Did you see this coming at all? Because there was a moment where you could kind of see that Jamaica were not the Jamaica they should be, and you could sort of see Curacao were playing some serious football, and obviously there's quite a change in the kind of players they're attracting now. When did you suddenly think, wait a minute, this could happen?
I think in the summer, in the Gold Cup. So the final groups were drawn before. And of course, every CONCACAF nation thought this was going to be their opportunity. It's ended up being the opportunity for 3 and maybe 2 more. But everyone thought they'd be one of those 3 teams. Why? Because the big boys were out of the way. The US, Mexico, and Canada hosting this World Cup means you didn't have to deal with these difficult qualifiers in the US. You didn't have to sort of maybe bunker and try and get a draw against these teams that have so long been the dominant nations in the region, and still are, because of the economic differences, the talent. One thing that I think is so interesting about CONCACAF is that you have these huge contrasts where, in the US press, we've kind of reached to various cities in the US: Huntsville, Alabama; Tempe, Arizona; Mesquite, Texas, a suburb of Dallas where I live. They're all the same population size as Curacao, and yet Curacao has to play the U.S. with the economic might, with the huge pool of population. And that, to me, is kind of the encapsulation of the CONCACAF region. When these final groups were drawn, you knew there was going to be a chance for these teams, but there were huge favorites in each group, Jamaica being the big one in Group B. But Jamaica had a really difficult end to World Cup qualifications previous round. They got through without any, issues. They made it, but they struggled. They had a game where they went on the road to the British Virgin Islands and were only able to get a 1-0 victory. Probably should be a little more, comprehensive if you're going to be a team that makes the World Cup. So Then they go into the Gold Cup in the summer, their Continental Championship. They didn't get out of the group stage. It was the first time in, I think, 9 tries maybe that Jamaica hadn't gotten out of the group stage in that tournament. So you say, oh, this is not the Jamaica of old. And that's where I think they started to show, okay, well, if Jamaica can't do it, who can? And in that group, it was pretty clear that Curacao was going to be the team. They had an okay Gold Cup, not fantastic, but the idea was there. The playing philosophy was there. So, look, I would say this summer, I was saying, oh, maybe this is something we're going to need to watch. But the project has been in motion since 2015. I mean, it's been a 10-year project. I think, a lot of times we laugh when we hear managers say something like that. Oh, sure, buddy, we're going to give you a decade to try and get this figured out. And Curacao didn't have the continuity of one manager, one sporting director, one federation president. But everyone has had kind of the same idea that they have continued, and now it pays off with, I think, kind of the seeds being planted back 10 years ago, but that first fruit really showing up probably in June.
Obviously, a lot has been made of the Dutch connection. Curacao is a former Dutch colony and even now is not fully independent. It's an autonomous country within the Kingdom of the Netherlands. So that in itself is extremely unusual to have a non-independent nation at the World Cup. And obviously, the squad is largely born in the Netherlands. I think it's only Tahith Chong, who I don't think even played in this last international window that was born. Is this sort of, I suppose, is it down to this sports passports initiative that Curacao have managed to achieve this turnaround?
Well, Curacao, their sort of quirk is that basically the passport is almost not an issue. Like it's not that hard to get the Dutch passport or to get your Curacao representation if you are Dutch, but can prove that sort of heritage. Suriname, totally different story. They has the sports passport in 2019, I think, and totally different. We'll talk more about the Natio here in a bit. But I think the fact that, Curacao, when I went to Curacao in 2019, one of the things I spoke with a lot about manager Remco Vicentini, look, I think you guys and me and all of our listeners love this. We love international football. We all see the benefit of playing an international break. We dream that if we had made it at an Eredivisie club, of course we would be flying back across the Atlantic to play for Curacao. But it's easier to say that and dream about that. And some guys, I think, on the roster are like that. You look at how long Leandro Bacuna has been playing for this national team, totally deserves this, has been the leader for 10 years. And there's some guys like Obispo, the center back, who was so key in the October-November windows. And even Tahith Chong, you mentioned, born in Curacao, he held out, didn't make his debut until September. So that kind of idea of will I represent Curacao or not, I think kind of matters. But at the same time, they're all eligible. They all fly the flag. And I think critically, one thing that Remco Vicentini really did in 2019 to start this project, to get this recruitment effort going, he made it fun. It sounds silly, but I think we see a lot of examples, of teams recruiting in the diaspora. I think especially in CAF, but sometimes in CONCACAF, Asia as well, where, players commit, they show up, and they're like, this isn't good. I could just be in my home city playing for, training with my club, maybe going to a nightclub, enjoying my weekend, my one weekend off that I get off every couple months. Why would I take these flights, not even first class, not even business class in some cases, and do this? Well, in Curacao, the answer is you show up and they pick you up in like a big retrofitted school bus with lights, with music, with a kind of thatched roof. It's painted bright blue and yellow, like the, Curacao flag. It drives you into the city. People are greeting you, clapping, waving. They go to like a hardware store when I was there to do like a meet and greet with fans. Oh my gosh, we love you. Thank you for representing Curacao. They have team dinners. They just have fun. And I think like that, a lot of ways, it sounds kind of silly, but that is the difference between what Curaçao's done with their kind of diaspora recruiting process and what I see some other nations kind of fail to do, and why I think it doesn't work. These guys want to show up because they like it.
That makes a lot of sense. One thing that I think ties in a bit with this is the Dick Advocat story. Now, I was reading that his recruitment was a really unusual story, that they had shortlisted some coaches they wanted in Curacao, right? And I think Louis van Gaal turned them down, said, I only want a coach team that's going to win the World Cup. Maybe another coach turned them down. And that actually Dick Advocat basically kind of chased down this job. He got in touch and was like, I really want to do this. So I guess the question I had is like, how much has Dick Advocat been a big figure in this? How much is he responsible for this team that, as you say, has so much potential becoming actually able to get to this point?
I think that he's been critical, but I also think that there's some pushback quietly. I think everyone's really happy for him now and happy that he's there. And, I think he also brings a fair amount of sponsorship dollars. Corendon, this travel company, I think they do a lot of the flights from Amsterdam to Curacao. They've used the Curacao team as kind of their vehicle to get Dutch people to know about Curacao and want to go there and want to travel. Kind of like if Visit Rwanda wasn't problematic, I guess. But, with Advocaat, I think he's been very professional, but Gus Hiddink was professional too, right? You've had these big kind of legendary Dutch coaches that have shown up before. Not as much of coaching pedigree, but Patrick Kluivert wanted this team to succeed, has Curacao roots, showed up, wasn't very good. So I think that he does deserve a huge amount of credit, but I think there's a lot of credit to probably go around. Guys like Remco Byzantini, who started the project, Dean Goree, his assistant, who was also huge in starting the Suriname project. He is currently Advocaat's assistant and the director of football for Curacao, so he's involved in both the men's and the women's side with the recruitment, with making sure players are happy and having fun, like I mentioned. So I think there's enough kind of credit to go around. Advocaat deserves it. I think he's been the most kind of like tactically proficient manager that's shown up for Curacao by far. Some of that is the fact that Obispo joins up, Hansen, the winger from Middlesbrough, joins up. You have these new players that come in that help with the tactics where you say, I could really use somebody to cover at center back. God bless him. I hope he gets his flowers too. But like Cuco Martino was the center back for like 7 to 10 years on this team. And for the last 5, you said, we could probably use an upgrade there. They finally find one, get that in the recruiting efforts. And I think Advocaat was a huge part of that. So I guess I would say, yes, Dick Advocaat, really important, clearly. And now he'll be coaching at the World Cup. Although he didn't, he missed that last game because of personal issues. I think his wife, we hope she's well. We hope he's well. But ultimately, I think it's a situation where there's plenty of credit to go around. And luckily, this is such a crazy story that I think, hopefully those folks will get their due that have been involved, that have been behind the scenes recruiting as well. Advocaat, I think, just did it better than some of his predecessors, especially on the field.
There's so many strands that we wanted to touch on in this episode, so many crazy facts, crazy stories, not just the population size, there's also the fact that I think Curacao, am I right in saying that to get from their game in Bermuda to Jamaica, they had to fly via London because there wasn't a flight connection? I mean, You talk a lot about CONCACAF craziness. For me, this just embodies CONCACAF craziness, this snippet.
I saw that too. I'm not 100% sure on their routing, to be honest, but I've been multiple times in Miami, and that becomes like the CONCACAF hub, because for many of these Caribbean nations, sometimes geographically it is, 100, 200 miles, but teams are flying 500 miles to Miami and 500 miles back because there's no ferries, there's nothing. You have to go to Miami and you have to fly back. So I saw something about their routing. I don't know exactly what it was, but you have to get creative. And that's part of the reason too, that you talk about like what's Advocaat's influence, what's the federation kind of part in this. It is so important to get your logistics right in the CONCACAF region, because if you don't, your players are tired, they're frustrated, and they're not going to be able to perform their best. And it is the difference between going to a World Cup and not.
There's obviously so many more things we could say about Curacao. It's a fascinating story, but there was actually a country that qualified for the World Cup in Curacao, wasn't there? And it wasn't Curacao. Tell us a little bit about Haiti, what happened to them this week, and why they've been playing their games 800 kilometers away from home, for anyone that's not familiar with the geopolitical situation at the moment.
Yeah, Haiti qualifying from Curacao, which allowed them to use their neutral site. Haiti last hosted a World Cup qualifier, or any match, actually, in 2021. It was actually one window after Belize had their bus surrounded by gangsters with guns. I talked to a few people after that on the Belize squad. They said they didn't leave their hotel again, that they trained by the pool, kind of trying to get reps in because they were so afraid, understandably so. I've never had my bus surrounded by gangsters with long guns. Even after that, Haiti was still able to play one game in Haiti, which is something that we can talk about past decisions 4 years ago. But since then, Haiti haven't been able to play at home. They first were playing some in the neighboring Dominican Republic. They've tried to play, I heard, in Miami, which has a huge Haitian population, but political realities are that there's a lot of pushback against Haitians, sadly, in the Dominican Republic, which neighbors. They've dealt with a lot of Haitians coming over on that same island, trying to cross the border, that you have kind of a border wall that's being constructed to keep Haitians from getting to the Dominican Republic. And in Miami, it's Donald Trump's territory right now. So he's passed regulations that Haitians can't get visas, that no one's allowed to come that's not already in the U.S. So finding a spot has been quite difficult because you have to get your team there. Most of the team can either travel on foreign passports or already have visas. You also got to get your support staff and all these different folks who need to be there. So Curacao really opened their arms in a moment of kind of CONCACAF solidarity, I would say. Jamaica let the U17s train before they went to the World Cup. It's just been difficult. Why is this happening? Because of that continued gang violence. I've seen estimates get higher and higher, but either 85 to 90%, according to the United Nations, of Port-au-Prince, the capital of Haiti, is controlled by gangs right now. It's not as bad in other parts of the country, but it's still very difficult. So, we always talk about football being the most important, non-important thing. There's just not a lot of space for it right now. I talked to some people running youth clubs there that they're still going. Talked to some players that are still kind of pursuing this dream of being a professional, but it's very, very difficult there. So the fact that Haiti's men's national team, some of whom have never played in Haiti, a coach who's never been to the country, that they were able to qualify for this tournament is absolutely remarkable. And when I spoke with a couple of the players before, I don't want to, again, football, look, like we all love it, but when you're talking about like life or death, gang violence, the national stadium was overtaken by gangs. There's turf wars for different fields that are used. It doesn't feel important, and yet I didn't. So I'm trying to put context in it. I talk to these players. I'm not going to bring up, hey, well, I know the situation is bad, but I'm not going to say, hey, can football change things, and kind of put this Disney ending on it. And yet, 3 different players, without me bringing it up, told me if we qualify, Haiti's going to be different. And I think we're starting to see some of the kind of fallout from that and the results. People in Haiti, I've seen the hashtags trending. I've seen people, in the celebrations in the street that did take place. That's not something that's really been happening. People have not been able to go out and just be in public without fear. There's some gang situations in those celebrations too, unfortunately, but that's the reality of what Port-au-Prince specifically is living right now. So the fact that they're able to do this on a neutral site, the scenes of them getting these big results, watching on television or on the phones, watching the streams to see what the other games are before they can start celebrating, it really is kind of what we want football to be. And it's stunning and fantastic.
I think your dog agrees with you.
Yeah.
It does sound like that.
Rosita, the CONCACAF corgi, likes to get involved now and then.
I was going to say, Jon, about this. You mentioned this moment where they're all gathered around the phone, right? This is to watch the closing moments of, Costa Rica's game?
Costa Rica, Honduras, yeah.
Honduras game, right? They need to see that game out as 0-0 in order to qualify, and they're all gathered around the phone watching it. And there's something incredible about that moment and the reaction and the moment where they realise they qualify being, I don't know, there's something about the fact it was gathered around a phone in the centre circle that it just felt like kind of a really fitting way for that to be celebrated, I think.
Well, absolutely, because the other thing about Haiti not playing at home is they felt all of their support through screens, right? They get messages on Instagram, they hear from fans on Facebook and TikTok, and that's where the national pride comes from. That's where they hear from these people on the ground saying, help us make our country better. You are representing us. And I think getting those messages through the screen have been huge support. Even Haiti's federation, look, we can talk about social media management. Is someone doing it full time? The Haiti's federation does these sort of like rambling live streams before and after games where the team is like getting ready, where they're just kind of wandering the hotel and then they'll just see a player and they'll just be like, hey, what's up? And do these kind of casual interviews. But in a way, other countries are used to having that, especially in the CONCACAF region. But when the players show up at the airport, they get greeted, or they do these meet and greets at different stores and sponsors, etc. That closeness with the national team really exists in a lot of these CONCACAF countries, especially the smaller ones. And in Haiti, that just hasn't happened. And so it's been fostered through this social media environment. And so the fact that, they're used to looking at their phones and getting that support. And then after the game, multiple players popping up on Instagram Live. And I wrote in my newsletter, it was like a real celebration. I think we see a lot of times, professional players, they want to take care of their body. A lot of these guys have games a couple days later. Oh yeah, maybe have a sip of wine, but nothing. Nah, man, these guys were smoking cigars. There was champagne. It was real. It was real joy. And also being able to have the few Haitians that are able to come to Curacao, whether they traveled from the US, from France, wherever, the fact that they were able to be there and share in that moment was huge. And, you mentioned you see it come through the phone, the support had been coming. A lot of the players pick pick up their phones, but some guys just like fell to the ground and were in tears. And I thought it was so, we've seen it before, but it's so football that like I really felt they were crying in the same way that the Costa Rican players were crying. Multiple players like totally laid out on the ground, body convulsing, real tears falling. And obviously the Haiti tears are joy and the Costa Rican tears are sorrow. But man, isn't that the game that it just provokes that full, real, strong emotion from the people involved because they know what it means. Haiti for the people that are looking through the screen and Costa Rica for the people that were in the stadium.
The fact that the Haiti coach has never been to the island itself is wild, but there are some other amazing stories within that squad as well. Jose Araúz on Twitter says that the Haitian goalkeeper Josue Duverger will be the first footballer playing in a fifth tier to represent his country at the World Cup. He plays for FC Cosmos Koblenz, I've never heard of them, in the Oberliga Rheinland-Pfalz Saar. And Michael Talks Football on Twitter says Ricardo Ade travelled to Thailand with the dream of becoming a footballer, but he was scammed by an agent and ended up living on the streets. Ricardo went to the United States to join Miami United in the 4th division. Santiago Morning of Chile opened its doors to him in 2017. And I think, John, before we came on air, you said he's now just been playing in a Copa Libertadores semi-final. So sort of throw that over to you for your reaction and if there are any other amazing player stories within the Haiti squad as well.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the other goalkeeper, Johnny Placida, is like a CONCACAF legend, just been around forever. Dukins Nason scored a hat trick against Keylor Navas in Costa Rica in, the first window that kind of puts Haiti in frame to even do this. He's trying to become Haiti's all-time goal scorer, something he takes like huge pride in, and he's not that far off. You have these new heroes that I think carry on from the 1974 team that Haiti had that, I think a lot of kids growing up in Haiti, a lot of kids in the Haitian diaspora know those names. Now they'll know these names, right? So the fact that these guys made it is incredible. I think this team, it's so interesting because you talk like the manager's never been there. Duke LaCroix, who was based in New Jersey, now is in the USL Championship here in the United States. He's never played in Haiti. Gavin Matusala, defender, he's never played in Haiti, from Montreal. There are guys from Dukins is from France, Johnny Placida is from France, and then Ricardo Ade had this dream that ends up taking him to Ecuador, through Chile, via Miami, via Thailand, and getting scammed. And, I think that there is a huge Haitian diaspora population in Chile. The women actually played there this year in a series of friendlies, and the Haitian community there basically filled this very small venue that the Chileans were using. And I think like you see that a Haitian, because of this difficulty, the story of Haiti being the first Black Republic, the first ever successful slave revolution that still has so much pride, and yet like sort of the consequences that the world has levied on them because of that, that's big tax on France. And, I'm sure a lot of people know a lot more about the history of Haiti than me, but if you want to look into it, it's great to look into. And now the situation with the gang violence, with the difficulty, the fact that you have players from the US, players from Canada, players from France, players who came up from in Haiti, and now a player or two that represent kind of this pathway of coming through South America and this new migrant journey. I think it's just a really beautiful representation of how Haiti has this spirit that Haitians overcome and now are doing something that they haven't done in decades and decades and decades, with a team that kind of has someone that everyone can see, whether you're a 13-year-old Haitian kid in Santiago trying to find your identity and maybe feeling discriminated against or maybe not, or you're a French Haitian, or you're sitting in Port-au-Prince, worried to leave your home. You got somebody who can identify with you. And, what else is a national team but the kind of sum of a country?
Paul, it's quite emotional just talking about this, isn't it? But there's so much other stuff that's happened in CONCACAF as well. What should we ask John about next? Because, we've got Panama, we've got Suriname, we've got Jamaica. Where should we go next?
I was going to have a word on Suriname, because I know, John, you know a lot about Suriname. You went there recently, and I did some amazing work from there. And I wondered, Suriname's almost the flip reverse on that evening from Haiti, right? So Suriname entered the final week thinking, this is going to be our chance, this is our moment, but just really didn't show up in that final group game. But what I found really fascinating with this 93rd minute own goal that went in for them, that nobody celebrated, which actually proved to be pretty crucial, right? So maybe you could sort of talk us through Suriname's really weird final group game.
Well, they're playing in Guatemala knowing that a win would continue their journey no matter what. And there were a lot of concerns in Panama because Panama was the other team that was still alive. Well, we just beat Guatemala. And we haven't always been cool to Guatemala. There's some Central American rivalries. So there were a lot of worries. Is Guatemala going to roll out a B team, a C team, some sort of horrendous looking squad that Suriname can just bowl over, and then Panama is going to have to go through the playoff route in the World Cup? Well, it didn't go like that at all. Guatemala not only played their strongest team, they had a great performance. 3-0 at one point. Oscar Santis, who's he played in Georgia for a minute, actually, back in Guatemala, but I think he'll probably end up in MLS or maybe a South American country. Fantastic winger. He scores, other players doing well. And then all of a sudden you have this moment where it just seemed like Suriname's players were like, well, there goes the dream. I talked to Suriname's general manager yesterday, and he said he was on the sideline kind of trying to get the message to the players like, hey, you're still in this because of that draw in Costa Rica, Honduras. Guys, if Honduras had scored, they would have gone through. If Costa Rica scored, it would have gone to fair play points. It would have gone to how many cards you'd gotten. But Suriname's, that own goal that you mentioned, Paul, that Suriname doesn't realize changes their entire fate. They don't celebrate. And the general manager, Brian, was saying to me that he said, I said, no one seemed to know what was happening. He said, I knew what was happening. I was going crazy, but no one else was celebrating. He said he was kind of trying to get the message to the players like, hey, go nuts, go get another one. This could be it. And so the fact that Suriname sort of backed their way into the playoff, I think takes a little of the luster off of kind of the energy around the team and the country. But that energy will get hyped back up before that March playoff because they're on the verge of something incredible. And look, yeah, they kind of blew it on the last day, I guess. But there's a country that's ranked, I think, 125 or 126 in the FIFA rankings that almost qualified directly for a World Cup. So to me, it's a fantastic story. Same sort of situation with the recruitment. But the fact that they were so close, I think they got hopeful. I might even say greedy. But the fact that they're in the playoff to me is mission accomplished. It's a success. And now you kind of see what happens.
So they're one of two CONCACAF nations in the playoffs because you've got Jamaica going through as well. We got this amazing sort of 6-team mini tournament that I think, speaking from mine and Paul's perspective, we're almost looking forward to this as much as the World Cup itself. So you've got the winner of New Caledonia and Jamaica facing the Democratic Republic of Congo. Then you've got the winner of Bolivia and Suriname facing Iraq. Which of those two CONCACAF nations do you think has the best chance of making it through? They're quite tough paths for both of them.
Yeah, it's funny because I think Jamaica clearly has the easier first game and clearly has the tougher second game. I think if Suriname gets through that first one, then maybe there's something there for them. But it's going to be a lot tougher. One really funny wrinkle that I've been kind of pointing out is that of course Bolivia. I almost call them altitude merchants. Obviously they take you, they take you to El Alto. That's what they do. I covered them. I did a big piece on them when they were here in the U.S. in the 2024 Copa America, talking to them about the altitude, about why is it so hard to play away? Why haven't you won more? And it was, really interesting to kind of hear their perspective. Guadalajara and Monterrey are the two sites. Monterrey is 1,000 feet above sea level. Guadalajara is 5,400 feet above sea level. So it's kind of clear. I think Bolivia, I don't know if they're pushing on some back channels right now, trying to get that Guadalajara pathway because they haven't announced, FIFA hasn't announced as we're this recording, which teams are going to which city. So one interesting wrinkle there. But if we know who's leading Jamaica and who shows up, maybe we could say if they got a chance. But right now, we don't really know.
Yeah, as a quick question on that, Steve McClaren just, in his post-game interview, just saying, I'm not the voice they need anymore. He's recognised that this is as far as he could take them. I know there were people in the press alluding to the fact he maybe hadn't got control of some of the egos in that dressing room and talk about maybe some of the players doing extracurricular activities during camps and stuff. And do you feel like is it a positive thing now that he's backed away to give a few months for someone to get this squad in order? Do you think that was the right move, or is there an argument that he's sort of just washing his hands of it and it's kind of ever so slightly a cowardly step, this?
I certainly wouldn't call it cowardly. I think that he, just like Heimer Hallgrimsson, who just took Ireland to the playoff after leaving Jamaica, I think he's kind of had the JFF experience. The Jamaican Football Federation has had this happen for the last, as long as I've been covering football. I mean, it really does get in this cycle where often a foreign coach comes in, they convince 3 or 4 players who who are eligible, maybe English born, maybe Jamaica born, whatever it is, three key players, 4 players who are eligible come in, join the squad. Jamaica gets better. They fall short of a goal. They don't have the institutional support they need. There's rumors of players at dance halls or at a bar. But the bigger thing is that everyone agrees that it's true that there are certain things that players ask for that the federation says no or cuts back on. The biggest one is business class flights. They've been talking about this for like 15 years. Can the players get business class flights? Can you set them up in a place where they can succeed? Because so many of these guys are coming from London or from other places in Europe. The flights are long. Again, not easy to just keep crossing the Atlantic. So I think, McClaren, I think his decision is probably more reflective of how he feels about the federation and very much vice versa than any sort of, can we make the playoff? What's next? So I wouldn't say McClaren goes out cowardly. What I would say was not brave of Steve McClaren is that we're talking about Curacao making it. We're talking about Jamaica not making it because of this draw. But Jamaica would have been the team that would have gone through with a draw if they had beaten Trinidad and Tobago 4 nights earlier at Port of Spain, which they were doing 1-0. Kevin Molino, this veteran Trinidad and Tobago player, puts in this goal that changes everything for Jamaica. Before the match, McClaren had said, I'd be fine with a draw. I'd be fine with a point. Why? He rested 2 players that were in yellow card jeopardy. I'm not saying that these 2 players would have totally changed the complexion of everything, but I think if you want to say that was a cowardly moment, that's McClaren's one, not the resignation, which I think is probably agreed to by him and the Fed. I don't have any, I'm not reporting this, but my suspicion is that there were conversations with the Federation when he comes in with the statement that he had written that seemed quite thought out. This was probably something that I think he was not surprised by, and I don't think the Federation was surprised by, that if they fell short, he was going to move on. So it's a federation that just needs to get its house in order. The talent is there. The support is there. Even like financially, say, why can't these guys get business class flights? Like Jamaica has gotten more sponsorship in the last cycle from like beverage companies, from snack companies, from transportation companies. Like there are local businesses in Jamaica that want to see the Reggae Boys make the World Cup and the Reggae Girls. You talk about the 2023 Women's World Cup. Jamaica makes history by becoming the first Caribbean country to get to a knockout game. And yet after that tournament, the women boycott the team because they didn't get the bonuses they were deserved. This is the kind of basic federation tasks that it doesn't seem like from the outside are getting done. And I think that was probably what spelled the end for McClaren, like it spelled the end for Helgumson, like it spelled the end for Winifred Schaefer, and even Tapa Whitmore, the local Jamaican coach who's kind of come in a couple times. That relationship wasn't good either. So I think we're kind of telling the same story over and over again.
We could talk to you for hours, and we'd love to have you back on the pod in the future. This has been absolutely fantastic. Thank you so much for joining. Before we let you go, Jon, could you tell people where they can find more of your stuff? I'm thinking your excellent newsletter and this travel series you're doing on YouTube about all of the World Cup venues at the moment.
Yeah, my newsletter is called Getting CONCACAF. I always say, if you understand the joke, it's for you. That's what we say when a referee doesn't go our team's way. You can join several thousand subscribers over there. I publish typically on Mexico every Monday for paid subscribers, but then usually there's something for the free folks as well. So hopefully you join up with our community there. And then my YouTube is Jon Arnold FC. There's no H in John. I've got this travel series. The first episode, Guadalajara, is out. I also did a mini documentary from Suriname, just kind of telling some of the story, that the tragedy that they're overcoming, the recruitment efforts, how do these players feel? Are they Dutch? Are they Surinamese? Hopefully people can check that out to get some more insight on that. And I'm on all the short video platforms as well, TikTok, Instagram, also at Jon Arnold FC. Again, like a lot of my coverage is Mexico focused. So if you're not into that, just wait for the international breaks. And if you're just into Mexican football, then just wait for the club's game to return, I guess. But yeah, it's on Jon Arnold FC and then Getting CONCACAF.
Excellent. We'll stick some links to that in the episode description for the viewers and listeners. Jon, thank you so much.
My pleasure, guys. Take care.
Welcome back to part 2 of The Sweeper, in which we'll be turning our attention to other continents, namely Europe, South America, and Africa. We've got stories about 3 clubs that could win their respective leagues, but perhaps have no right to for very different reasons. So we'll come on to that in just a second. But before we get into all of that, Paul, we have some great news. There's going to be a Sweeper football shirt that listeners can buy. Give us the lowdown on that.
Yeah, so we're teaming up with Stings, the manufacturer who we've spoken about before for making amazing Pacific Island football shirts. They are absolutely beautiful. And they have offered to make a Sweeper podcast football shirt. So, we've been talking for a while about merch. It'd be nice to have some Sweeper merchandise. And what's more obvious than having a football shirt?
Yeah, exactly. And am I right in thinking, I know you've come up with the idea for this, but that the patrons will get a say on the design of this shirt and also varying levels of discount depending on their membership tier?
Yeah, that's right. So if you're an ultra or a board member, the two higher tiers, you'll get to have a say on the design. So you'll have a vote on that. If you are any kind of patron, you'll get a reduction on the shirt. But obviously, the higher level you are, the higher tier you are, the more of a reduction you get. So, for example, if you're a highest tier board member, you'll get a shirt for free, and then the reductions sort of go down from there.
Excellent. Well, we'll be keeping you up to date on the design process for that. If you want to have a say in it, of course, patreon.com/sweeperpod is the place to do that. But back to the content now. Paul, where do you want to go first? We've got Europe, South America, and Africa.
Could we go to Europe, Lee?
We can, and we'll be going specifically to Switzerland because there is a very unfamiliar face at the top of the Swiss Super League table at the moment, Paul. It is FC Thun, promoted only in the summer, 9 points clear with a third of the season gone. I did not have that on my bingo card for this season.
No, I didn't. And I can't go for the fact they're just called tuna. Thun is tuna, right?
Yeah, they're from German-speaking Switzerland, and tunfish is indeed tuna.
Yeah, it's one of the few German words that I have at my disposal. It's quite a phenomenal thing that they've achieved, isn't it? And I think there's quite a few factors seem to be at play here, and I think part of it's the lack of form of the traditional giants like Basel and Young Boys are not particularly sort of playing well. But they've had one of those kind of crazy charges where they start off the season just trying to stay up and look, aiming for that fabled sort of 30-point mark, and they're there already and leading the way. It's phenomenal, really.
Yeah, at the time of recording, 31 points from 13 games. That has pretty much always been enough to beat relegation in Switzerland, so they've ticked off that box already, and now they are, I guess, going for the title. I suppose much of it depends on whether Basel and Young Boys can pick up form. They've both conceded 5 goals to Lausanne, who are right down towards the bottom of the table at the moment. So they've had a dire season. But I do think in these cases where a team is doing this well, it is a little bit reductive of us, Paul, if we say it's just down to giants underperforming. Because I think there's a little bit more to this. There's a very tight-knit squad here, worth only €13 million in total, put together by a former player, Mauro Lustrinelli, who actually played for Thun back in their Champions League days 20 years ago. And he has instilled this real grit in the team, which has come to play on several occasions recently. I'm thinking before the international break, the game against Servette, when Thun really didn't play that well, but still scored a goal in the 90th minute. So they're winning games when they're not playing well, which, as we all know, is an old adage in football of a successful team. But they've also got quite a small squad. And I think what that means is that he's not having to leave people out. The spirit is good. They've got cohesion because the same players are playing all the time. And now Opta, StatsNuts Opta, are giving them a 70.3% probability of finishing top of the regular season in the Swiss Super League.
Wow. God, it's a phenomenal achievement, isn't it? And I think, am I right in saying, Lee, that, okay, this shouldn't put a dampener on it too much, but they are part of a multi-ownership group, but it's just not one of the more famous groups.
Yeah, although given the portfolio of clubs, I am surprised that I hadn't heard of them before. They are called the Pacific Media Group. They have previously or currently have stakes or full ownership of clubs such as Barnsley in England, Nancy in France, FC Den Bosch in the Netherlands, Oostende in Belgium, Kaiserslautern in Germany, and Tichy in Poland. And it is fair to say that they have had mixed success, because I think we talked on the pod before about Oostende in Belgium going out of business, going bankrupt following the involvement of the Pacific Media Group. I think the fans at Barnsley weren't best pleased with their involvement either. But now this is the other end of the spectrum, where they could be the owners of a club that takes Switzerland by storm and shocks everyone.
Yeah, and again, if we've learnt anything from Mjällby in Sweden, it's that, you keep thinking the bubble's going to burst, don't you? And week to week to week, I thought with that one, when are they going to drop off? And it just never happened. So maybe we will have a team called Tuna winning a league title.
Amazing. Yeah, in fact, the last club in Europe at this time of recording, because we're recording before the weekend, the last club that was promoted and then became domestic champions the following season was Ararat Armenia in 2019. But this season, Paul, promoted clubs are flying across UEFA's 55 nations. Not just Thun, but in Belarus, ML Vitebsk could win the title this weekend. By the time you listen, guys and girls, this could be the case already. They could have already won the Belarusian league. We've got Kisvárda in Hungary. They are challenging towards the top. They would have, in fact, gone top before the international break with a negative goal difference if they had beaten Pax 1 or 2-0. And then you've also got Valletta, the Maltese club, who endured their first ever relegation a couple of seasons ago, have come back and are already playing very well in Malta. And I don't know if you remember the little anecdote, Paul, that I told you about Valletta after my trip to Malta, about the coffins. Yeah?
I do, and it's a reason why when Valletta went down unexpectedly to the second tier, which was, I think, the first time in their history and a real shock, there was an awful lot of schadenfreude. A lot of teams were delighted, weren't they? Because Valletta have this tradition where they hold a funeral procession for all the other teams in the league when they win the title. So they have like the coffins with the sort of emblazoned with the flags of their rivals, which I think is, I think it's meant in relatively good spirits, but it did mean when they went down, I think there was a fair bit of smirking from some of those other teams.
Yeah, I believe that's the perfect use of the phrase, the shoe was on the other foot then, wasn't it? Yeah, so we'll be keeping an eye on how all of those promoted clubs fare, and in particular Thun. I guess, Paul, if they are still in the running by the spring, I'm going to have to hop over the Austro-Swiss border and go and check out Tuna myself. But we'll keep you up to date on how they're doing in the Swiss Super League. We're going to move on next to... Should we go to Africa next? Should we go to Rwanda, where a duo or a trio of clubs from war-torn Sudan have got a new home?
Yeah, this was confusing to me. So it is a duo. It's Al Hilal and Al Merrikh, and some listeners may remember that last season they both took part in the Mauritanian League. In fact, I say took part. Al Hilal won the Mauritanian League and were announced as honorary champions. There was also another champion from Mauritania because they couldn't technically win it, Al Hilal. So Al Hilal and Al Merrikh have joined the Rwandan Premier League. There was a third side, Al Ahli Wad Madani, who were offered the chance to do it and I believe decided against this opportunity to join the league, I think possibly for financial reasons. But what's been confusing about this one, Lee, is that they seem to have joined the league and then there was this moment where it turned out CAF hadn't yet approved it, and it's only now 7 games into the season that they are officially part of this league. So they're going to have to play catch up to get kind of back level with these other teams because they are 7 games behind.
Yeah, I think the African football journalist Mickey Jr. wrote on his Facebook that their scheduled fixtures had, in the interim, been converted into friendlies until they got that approval from CAF. But now it's come through, right? So now what they're going to have to do is catch up on 6 or 7 rounds of matches that have already taken place. That is one hell of a fixture backlog, isn't it?
It is. And what really confused me, and this may be just partly because it's hard to get information from Rwanda in football terms, is that there was this moment where Al Hilal appeared to have started their season a while back. I think this is November the 10th, so a couple of weeks ago. It seemed to have started their season with a 2-0 win over Kigali. And there were websites, quite legitimate, trustworthy websites, local newspapers, saying Al Hilal begin their Rwanda Premier League campaign. But then there were other people saying it was just a friendly even at that time. And now it has been even more confusing that if you look on certain websites, one game is listed in Al Hilal's league table. They're listed as having played 1 and won 1, while every other team has 7. But I presume it's that friendly that game has now been converted to a friendly, and at the time people believed that was them starting the league. But yeah, it has certainly made for a slightly confusing situation.
It's definitely interesting, the choice of location as well, because last season they were 5,000 kilometres away in Mauritania. Now they're 2,500 kilometres away in Rwanda. And they won, as you said, Paul, in Mauritania. There is a team called APR in Rwanda who have won the league for each of the last 6 seasons. Could they simply go and oust them, dethrone them as well? Are they just going to go and win all of the African leagues now, Al Hilal?
It's not impossible, and I read quite a lot of the response to the teams coming over at Hilal and Al Merrikh, and it was very positive. It was a lot of saying, this is going to improve the level. These are strong teams. They're going to improve the level in the Rwanda Premier League. We're really welcoming this. But I think partly, again, with the caveat that they can't win the league. Al Hilal cannot come in and win the league. They will only ever be honorary champions. And I think that would make a real difference if any team thought they could take the title away. That would, I think, make people less likely to welcome them in.
A bit of trivia for you, Paul, before we hop on over to South America. Al Hilal and Al Merrikh will now join a very, very, very small group of clubs that have played in the leagues of 3 currently existing countries. There is, in fact, as far as I know, to the best of my knowledge, only one other club in world football that has played league football in 3 currently existing countries. They moved leagues again this summer. We've talked about them on the pod. Who are they?
Oh, okay. Is it the team from Brunei, DPMM?
It is, Paul. Yeah,
yes,
it is.
Of course, because they've played in Brunei, which was funny in a way, because aren't they the sort of ruler of Brunei, like the family's team? So I thought them playing in the Brunei League, and I think they did sort of steamroller it. They've also played in Malaysia and Singapore.
Yes, but they're now back in Malaysia after a stint in Singapore, where I think they won the Singapore League actually in the past, but they're currently, I think, second bottom in the Malaysian League. So I wonder if they'll simply, if they get relegated to the Malaysian second tier, if they'll simply swap countries again.
That'd be a nice thing to be able to do, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Maybe they'll play in 4 different countries. Yeah. But yes, we'll keep an eye on how those 2 clubs do, and particularly if Al Hilal look to be putting together another title tilt, I'm sure we'll revisit that later in the season. But we're going to finish in South America, in Argentina, with some absolute craziness, because, Paul, we became aware of this because of a Twitter post by the Argentinian football club Estudiantes, and my Spanish is very basic, but it looked a little bit spicy what they were saying. They seemed a bit peeved, we'll put it that way.
Yeah.
And what's happened in Argentina is that the Argentinian FA has introduced a brand new title called Campeón de Liga, which just means champion of the league, and it is awarded to the team with the most points in the annual table, which actually breaks with tradition in Argentina, because they have this apertura and this clausura, this opening round, this closing round. And so they actually don't have a recognised champion for the aggregate table. They have a first half of the season winner, they have a second half of the season winner, they also have a competition where those 2 winners play each other for a title called the Trofeo Campeones, but now they've got a 4th one, which is simply for the aggregate table winner. And in 2025, that's gone to Rosario Central, who didn't win the Apertura. They are yet to win the Clausura, but they've still got this title with 66 points. Now, where it gets a little bit controversial is that the authorities claim that the introduction of this new title was decided unanimously in an executive committee meeting, but Estudiantes and their president, Juan Sebastian Veron, have released a statement on social media claiming that no vote was held on the new title. And I think what they're particularly annoyed about is that this was not specified in the competition regulations before the start of the season. It's something that has literally been decided, in their view, unilaterally, towards the end of the season.
Wow, what a mess. I mean, it does seem like a very odd thing to institute without giving a real lead into it, doesn't it? Seems like a recipe for controversy if you just suddenly create a new title. Very odd thing to do, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, the AFA have refuted that allegation from Estudiantes. They said everyone's consulted, so it's a bit of a he said, she said situation at the moment, so we don't really know either way. But in any case, what it does make for is a crazy landscape in Argentinian football at the moment, because they have, according to the website AS, they have 8 different champions, Paul. There are 8 different titles awarded in the Argentine football calendar now, and I'm going to try and take you through them. I had a headache just trying to make head or tail of this. But what you've got the 4 we talked about. So you've got the Apertura, you've got the Clausura, you've got the Trofeo Campeones, which is when the champions of the 2 play each other. And you've also got this new one, Campeón de Liga, for the highest aggregate points total for the season. Number 5, you've got the Copa Argentina, the traditional domestic cup. You've got the Supercopa Argentina. You've got the Supercopa Internacional, which is a sort of like an exhibition match to promote Argentine football abroad. And then the 8th one, you've got the Campeón del Año, which is another newly created trophy. It comes into force in 2026, whose champion will be determined by a triangular tournament between the winners of the Copa Argentina, the Supercopa Argentina, and the Supercopa Internacional. Are you still with me, Paul? Is anyone still with me after all of that?
I was clinging on for dear life, Lee, but I think I fell off somewhere along the way. It just seems like it just undermines it, doesn't it? The more titles there are, the less important they all become, surely. It just feels very odd. You get to a point where there's like 16 different champions. I don't think anyone's really the champion at that point. Yeah,
it is. That's the chief criticism, is that it doesn't actually give you anything, a lot of these new titles, other than they're symbolic, because the continental berths for CONMEBOL are still decided in the same way. So it's literally just a symbolic thing, but it does to some degree devalue titles when you have 8 of them for your domestic league. Right, Paul, it's time for our end of episode game. It's on the spot. You're 6-4 up from the last episode. Do you want to quickly recap for people how it works?
Yeah, so there are 5 categories with increasing difficulty: continent, country, city, club, and player. Lee here will have to choose which one you want to take on, knowing that if you choose continent, it's 1 point, country 2, city is 3, club is 4, and a player is 5. I then name something from one of those categories. You have to just give me a fact about it. And we've sort of come to a kind of, as we've gone along, we've kind of come to a rule where it depends how obscure it is, how much you've got to give me. So if it's kind of discretionary what you've got to give me. But if it's a really obscure thing, if you can give me a fact, that's great. If it's slightly less obscure, you've got to give me a bit more.
Got to do a bit more work, yeah. Well, I'm going to go for City. That's worth 3 points, and that would put me back in the lead. We haven't had a City yet. Ooh. So if you give me the city that you've chosen, and I've got to try and find a football fact about that city, what are you going to give me?
Your city, Lee, is Reykjavik.
Oh, I can do that. That has the highest proportion of clubs from its capital region of any top flight UEFA league. I think it's 8 or 9 out of its 12. In fact, I think it's just more capital clubs than any UEFA league. That's what I'm going to go for.
That's a great fact, and it is. Yeah, that is absolutely correct. I thought you'd have something, and I knew you'd have something, but I didn't know it'd be as good as that. That was very quick and easy. You just smashed that one in, really, Lee. That was
7-6. And on that winning note, listeners, we shall bid you farewell. We'll see you again very soon.